Welcome to Blacklisted Radio. We are live. It's the 31st day of March 2019. I'm your host, Doug Owen. It's good to be with you. There are so many things to get to, but first, if you'd like to be part of the show, if you'd like to be part of the conversation, add your 2 cents. There's a lot of ways that you can do it if you want to support this show. Become a patron. Put $1 a month into the kitty. If enough people do that, we can usurp the commercial advertising interests that have invaded and destroyed the media. Just one of many ways that you can support this show. You can be part of it at blacklistedradio.com. There is an interactive chat room where there are people congregating from time to time, usually during the live show, and spamming during the weekdays, apparently. That's there. That's always fun. You can follow us on Twitter. BLN Radio is the handle. You can tweet at me. You can also text the show, 512-222-3067. Now, of course, I haven't been live, doing a live podcast in, I think, 3 weeks. So much has happened. Of course, the tragic event in Christchurch, New Zealand, the response, the end or possible end of the Russiagate probe by Mueller. That's interesting. Are people eating crow or still just living in their own delusional world where, I don't know, the interpretation, so much has been made of this report. Indictments are not being issued, and I think we've been in the weeds for so long that there has to be something to fill the void of not having the Russia collusion discussion any longer. Now, I'm not here to defend Trump. I don't carry water for the president or any of the business dealings. The people that he has surrounded himself with have shown that they like to get to the edge of the laws, maybe a little too much. And of course, that's not new. People like Paul Manafort, people like even lawyer Michael Avenatti, all these people that have, tried to that have played a pretty interesting. They've all had their own character in this long saga, the soap opera presidency, and this is going to be the shift. It's time to talk about 2020. That's what we will get from the mainstream media. A lot of analysis that, I listen to sports talk radio from time to time. Sometimes just to kind of get out of the political sphere of commentary, because, but the point being is that when you listen to it, 50% of the analysis, maybe more of that, is absolutely incorrect. You listen to people talk about which players, regardless of sport, have which attributes which will lead them to do these things, and through this analysis, that is why Team X or Team Y will win the match. And then the actual game happens, and some of the people are right, most of the people are wrong. There's actually a new, I think it's a Showtime documentary called Action about sports betting. Pretty interesting. I've watched a few of the episodes, and I think about that. The same thing with political commentary, with talk. People that make predictions for the presidency, who is going to be the DNC runner-up, the contender that's going to take on Donald Trump. Most of it's mindless, and it's mind control. You can't vote for Tulsi Gabbard. She likes Bashar al-Assad. She's a bad, bad person. You need, Joe Biden, unfortunately, is the most popular. And I find myself in it. But one of the things that I think is pretty interesting is something that we've noted for quite a while. The internet, the sleuths on the internet have been producing and highlighting creepy Joe Biden. He's actually a hashtag on several platforms. There was a time when you could be banned for this, but more and more accusers. There's one in particular that came out in the last few days, accusing Joe Biden of being a little touchy. He's a guy that likes to touch people. Now, that's not why I dislike Joe Biden. I do think it's pretty creepy, and noting that is not racist or evil. I think that he's going to have a big problem with the touchy, creepy Joe Biden thing, because if Donald Trump runs with that, and if he is the forerunner, which up to this point, I guess the polls said that, even though at the time he didn't have his hat in the ring, I'm not sure that he's actually said that he's going to run, but people want him to. They've watered down Bernie. They've all stolen from his platform so he doesn't sound so radical. That's politics today. That's what you're going to get on the mainstream media, is a lot of talk about things that may or may not happen, and 90% of it's incorrect. So I don't know how much value that brings to people, and that's why sometimes I just have to turn it off. I mean, I like to be abreast of what's going on, real-time news and information, but at the same time, there's just so much blah, blah, blah that comes out. Now, I was thinking about this kind of my own conspiracy theory about those we've heard, the Illuminati, the secret societies, the people that pervade Hollywood and that are, the upper crust of the occult are in these very powerful positions, and that they garner a lot of power and control over what is happening. And the secret, not for public consumption, discussions like the Trilateral Commission used to have. I don't know. It's so interesting and secret anymore. They're very public about it. Council on Foreign Relations, all these people that, had these kind of wacky ideas. But I was thinking about, just the concerted effort to go after Donald Trump, all of his friends, to create this fake narrative that has been very effective in the controlling and the bringing about of legislation to make it really hard for homegrown, hometown heroes to get into the political realm, because if you want to advertise on Facebook, there's all sorts of new rules, and if they're not in place, they will be to make sure that the Russians aren't hacking the election system, and they're not buying. RT doesn't buy $3,000 worth of Facebook ads that are 50-50 that hate Trump, hate Hillary. Just out there trolling, trolling, quite literally. So the reaction and the huge push to secure the elections, giving the DIA, the CIA, the NSA, well, we don't know what the real budget is, but billions upon billions of dollars in these $1 trillion, that should be the thing that people question. If Trump is the target of the deep state, and it appears that he is, why does he continue to fund these operations that are being used against him? I mean, we saw that with Jeff Bezos. It's not just the CIA or the NSA or other buddies and pals that are hacking Jeff Bezos. Apparently the Saudi Arabian government as well. But I saw this from Zero Hedge, and it made me think. Michael Avenatti, he is the lawyer for Stormy Daniels. I think Stephanie Clifford's her actual name, and she's, I don't know about star. That's a term, but she is an adult performer, videographer, probably a director. She does a lot of things, and I don't want to diminish any of them. But she got hooked up with this guy. And Michael Avenatti is, if you don't know, he was trying to extort Phil Knight, the Nike Corporation. It didn't work out well for him. But there's some new interesting tie-ins. Seagram heiress Claire Brofman had a dramatic day in court Wednesday where the accused, it's the NXIVM sex cult. They call it NXIVM, I think it is. NXIVM sex cult financier fainted in response to being asked if she'd secretly retained lawyer Michael Avenatti. And I'm thinking about, well, the people that are going after Trump and this kind of created storyline that we follow from day to day. If you're just thinking outside of the box, trying to step away from it and look at it more as a television show rather than real-time, realistic events. Because let's be honest, what we watch is much closer to a TV show that is designed for the dumbed-down population. It's definitely soap opera reality TV with news and sports scores intermixed. But so Michael Avenatti, he's part of this group of people that have been going after Trump and Trump friends and people that have been working behind the scenes in certain aspects. And a lot of these people, especially Hollywood ties, end up in this NXIVM sex cult. And maybe this is just a little too close to the highest of orders. Not sure. But creepy stuff. I mean, you could probably say the same thing about Scientology and how there are reports. I don't know if this is fake news, but we'll go with it. Because I saw on the internet that Scientology members look at Tom Cruise as if he is a mini god, a deity as they call it. Anyway, just food for thought. I mean, I started wondering if listening to political commentary and how much of it's wrong and how much of it's almost useless to the people that are listening to it. It's just kind of piecemealed ideas that get people ramped up. Not that interesting. Let's just move to the news war since we're talking about disinformation. But before we go there, I guess I do want to talk about what the massive response to the brutal attack that happened in Christchurch, New Zealand. I don't think that I really have to wrap up the details, and I don't have to do a eulogy either. I feel bad for the people, but just the analysis. I mean, I don't know if I was breaking any rules by reading the manifesto. You would think that looking at the response by the Internet and Telecommunications, the New Zealand government, that it's illegal to look at information about a murder unless somehow, the news organizations, that's what they would like, is that just licensed news organizations, government-regulated ones, present facts and give you the filter that you need to be able to digest that food. So, I don't know about you, but I read the manifesto. There was no reason not to. It was pretty easy, and I found it very interesting. The memeology, the references, the trolling that went on from this guy that seemed very well. He had a lot of thought that was placed into this murder, and he put forward this new idea that's not new, but it's kind of what I think a lot of people are moving towards, and that is accelerationism. It's pretty simple. Accelerationism, accelerating things, making the government show its fangs, creating situations where the government will restrict guns, where they will go after every right that we have under the Constitution, and really, reversing the trend away from the Magna Carta towards probably more what we have in China, and that is a social credit system. Trustworthy, untrustworthy. Can you get into college? Can you get into the train? Can you travel? We know now that if you have a lot of money in Hollywood, you can find a way to get your kid into an elite school in this country. That paves the way. And if you want to do it legally, you buy the building. You buy the building and name it Dr. Dre Memorial Building or the Dr. Dre Building for Scientific Research. And boom, get in. Anyway, just juxtaposing. That's how it works here. And of course, there is a Chinese elite and those that have and have not in places even like North Korea. There are chunky North Koreans that are not starving. But anyway, so much of it is kind of wasted thought. Khashoggi killers received training in the United States. That is what we learned. We learned that the killer in Christchurch had traveled, seemed well funded. I didn't kind of finish that thought, but anyway, of course, the New Zealand government banning more weapons, more firearms, making it even harder for people to own weapons, and it goes without saying that I don't think that that's the solution at all. Is it a shame that people kill one another and they want to do it in brutal fashion? Yes. So, but how often do we see this kind of motivation and orchestration? Now, whether or not he was funded by intelligence agencies to, do an Operation Style Gladio, I don't know. I didn't see as much commentary on that as we usually have. The false flag debate, but definitely not alone in what he was doing. Definitely connected, and I know people that have these viewpoints. I see them. Some of them are fans of the show in certain aspects. Probably not that many, but people that cross paths with those ideologies. Now, if you think that the Jews run the world and that's a problem, then you cross ideologies with people that are far more right-wing and crazy than, David Duke. Maybe not crazy. I shouldn't use that word. It's kind of a medical term, but you know what I mean. They've got a viewpoint that is counter to the norm. So they are kind of reminiscent of what was. They romanticize history and are looking for a place for cultural. I mean, they're looking for their own cultural safe space for white people, and that was one of the things that he mentioned. I think that if you're a critic of safe spaces for protected classes of people and thinking that certain classes of people are protected over others and should be, then I don't know how that you could support this idea that you need a special place for white European Americans. And blood and soil and a lot of these things. I mean, I saw a lot of the hype and the people that worked to make Charlottesville happen. And so this guy mentioned Anders Breivik. He mentioned Candace Owens being the political inspiration. It's kind of funny if she's a black Republican and pretty milquetoast, pretty passé as far as her politics. She's just kind of, standard Republican, God, country, save the babies kind of thing. Nothing wrong with that. The Constitution, she bangs that, and I appreciate it. But anyway, so reading through this, you realize a lot of it's been borrowed other ideologies, but this idea of accelerationism and where that will take us, it's an interesting idea that we should talk about a little bit more, and we will on the other side. Don't go anywhere. More to come. Blacklisted Radio. All right, welcome back. It's Blacklisted Radio. Thank you so much for being here. You can be part of the show. 800-313-9443 is the number if you'd like to chime in. If you have any thoughts on, I don't know, the solution to the frustrations that many people are having today around planet Earth don't always make sense, and sometimes people use violence to try to right the wrongs of others, to bring attention to strife. I mean, this guy, I'm not comparing him to Nelson Mandela, but Nelson Mandela, somebody that they love, that's heralded in this country as a hero used some of the same tactics, and under he and his wife, brutality far beyond 30, 40 Muslims being randomly targeted in New Zealand happened. So accelerationism, making things crappier, faster, so that people want to break off, and the system cracks. Either it forces good people to finally do something. This idea, and I kind of shared that ideology when I guess I was 10 years younger. Look, good people have to be pulled out. We have to bang them on the head to wake up. Wake up. Share some documentary films. We have to wake people up to the conspiracies that are abound, the real rulers of the universe, and to try to get them to understand. And so everybody's trying to put out something out there that's new, edgy, and it's the next big thing, and if it's not 9/11 truth, which, the truth about 9/11 has slowly been revealed, and only now, 19 years after, or 18 years after the fact, do we have a clear, admitted role by the Saudi government, or, those radical clerics they're trying to get rid of, that nice new prince over there, Ben A-hole. That dude, he's a good friend of Pompeo. He's a good friend of a lot of elite people, and that's why Donald Trump goes over there. And the picture, I cannot paint it for you as well over the air, but he and the Prince of Saudi Arabia touching the orb, this orb at this UN. No, it wasn't a UN. It was some intelligence center or something that they had, and just all the esoteric underpinnings and the weird stuff that's going on in the lifting of the foundations of these institutions. I guess that's been going on forever. If you look at back to the history of the Masons and the buildings and Gnosticism, all of that, you can find some parallels, and maybe you can cross some ideologies with other people in these very high up, high profile, interesting cults. The previously mentioned Nexium cult. But back to this, some of the ideology that, hey, we have to get things going now so people will get up and stand up against what's wrong. And that's kind of what the push, that's what you find. Other than a lot of trolling, talking about subscribing to PewDiePie. Some of you won't get that. That's because you're not in that demographic. Some of you absolutely know who PewDiePie is, and maybe fans. But the idea that voting for PewDiePie is a vote for white people, because he's the most popular YouTuber. Things that kind of, they're, I don't know how interesting it becomes, how relevant I am anymore when I start thinking about where 4chan and where all of these other interesting groups of people and ideas are being fleshed out, and where you find 50 people to make peppy memes all day long, that kind of stuff. Of course, New Zealand banned even Zero Hedge for providing the video. Yeah, I don't know how many of you wanted to listen or watch the video, but it's very kind of surreal. Like you're in a first-person shooter. This guy had a nice camera. It's almost unrealistic, because you can't. It's hard to fathom that is something that's real, because we've seen such great CGI, and most American movies and most of the video games that are popular today are all first-person shooter. So when you're watching a real first-person shooter, but that is now akin, if you have that video, to child pornography in New Zealand. So Yeah, the clamp down on the news, information. How are we going to shut it down? That is what they're trying to figure out. How can we shut down social media when these things happen? And that is the takeaway. That we already have legislation. We're already ready to go. Immediate knee-jerk reactions, taking away rights that have been bestowed, or at least the government has identified as valid for quite some while. I think it's inherently, it's your inherent right to be able to protect yourself. Other people, think that the government does a better job. That the government should handle things, that police officers are less likely to kill them than you are, or other people that could buy guns. Other bad guys. That's kind of hyper paranoia, but that's politics today. Lots and lots of hyper paranoia. Speaking of which, we turn to our next story. Vaccines are pushing pathogens, to evolve. If you haven't been watching a lot of the media, you haven't noticed and even politics, local politics about measles, getting your vaccines, chicken pox, whooping cough, pertussis, all of these things that we have been taking vaccines to eradicate in this country, and it did it pretty effectively for a long time. And now kids that are unvaccinated and vaccinated, we could argue about the proportions of vaccinated to unvaccinated and the validity of herd immunity, things like that today. But anyway, it's back. Or now we notice that it's back. The idea that measles, mumps, rubella, and any of these things had completely vanished, I think was kind of naive. But we could point to, I would call, a situation, a serious situation on the border. You can call it a crisis, you can call it an invasion, you can call it whatever you want. But we got big problems, not just on the border. The border is just where people are trying to escape from the problems that lay behind. Bad government, bad economies, social ruin, narco trafficking, drug trafficking, all of that, sex trafficking, trying to escape those things. And they're coming here. And, living conditions are piss poor in most of these countries. And so, and even in Europe, there's, people, I think there was a case where these unvaccinated kids brought the measles. Oh my God, 26 people have it. Oh my God, 100 people have it. It's horrible. We got to do something about it. Well, of course, that means that we want more government control over our bodies. A lot of the people that are hounding for it are the same people that don't want the government to own their body. They believe in Roe versus Wade. They believe in the right to abortion. We're not going to debate that here, because that is for the 2020 election, for you to debate abortion, whether it's okay. I don't think it's okay, like post-birth, like some people in government think, and other companies that extract baby parts. But I obviously don't support that. But where it's your right, where it's chromosome, how many weeks, that's all in the weeds for me. It seems like it should be pretty easy to identify, but the debate continues over things like that. But so this debate over whether or not you should be able to control your body has gone on, and it's highly, highly controversial. But those same people, support the idea that the government can mandate you to vaccinate yourself, or to put something in your body that you may or may not want. No matter how dumb or silly an idea it is to not take a vaccine when it's readily available. You could prevent cancer. It's 100% preventable if you watch the commercials for the HPV vaccine. This is preventable cancer. We've found the cure. Nobody's taking it. 80% of the population doesn't take it. Now, I'm not saying HPV isn't a serious thing. It doesn't cause cancer. But, Rick Perry, former governor of Texas, tried to mandate all schoolgirls in the state take it. And there was pushback. I mean, it's mostly religious groups that are pushing back. I've heard so much, even in, more right-leaning talk radio about, we can't, this is a huge problem. We have to find a solution. And, it's like, some guy shoots up at people. We have to find a solution so this never happens again. We're going to take everybody's guns, all of the rights from them, and take care of them better. People are so stupid, they don't take these vaccines. And so, I don't know how much of it. It was kind of a bombardment, it seemed like, week before last, about anti-vaccine parents, people, kids, the laws, and believe you me, just like in any other crises, there's always legislation that's just waiting to go forward. And so I'm kind of waiting for that shoe to drop. But Quantum Magazine actually had a really interesting article about mutations of these pathogens. So I'll just read a little bit from it. Really interesting, and I think that it brings about a lot of questions. If you don't have these pathogens evolving in response to vaccines, then we really don't understand natural selection. Just as antibiotics bred resistance in bacteria, vaccines can incite changes that enable diseases to escape their control. Researchers are working to head off the evolution of new threats. Researchers at the U.S. Department of Agriculture posit that the virus that causes Marek's, this is a disease, they give it to chickens to test it, has been changing over time in ways that it helped evade previous vaccines. Big question is whether the vaccines directly incited these changes or the evolution just happened coincidentally for other reasons, but they're pretty sure the vaccines played a role. In 2015 paper in PLOS Biology, Reed and his colleagues vaccinated 100 chickens, leaving 100 others unvaccinated. They infected all the birds with strains of Marek's that varied in how virulent as in how dangerous and infectious they were. The team found that over the course of their lives, the unvaccinated birds shed far more of the least virulent strains into the environment, whereas the vaccinated birds shed far more of the most virulent strains. The findings suggest that the Marek's vaccine encourages more dangerous viruses to proliferate. The increased virulence might then give the viruses the means to overcome birds' vaccine-primed immune responses and sicken vaccinated flocks. So, you're like, why are all these vaccinated kids? That's always been my kind of debate. And I've heard this so much. If you don't vaccinate your kids, I don't want them around my kids. They could kill them. They could infect them. And, well, what about a kid with an Xbox One? They'll sit there and veg your child out for, I don't know, they just hang out and eat corn syrup all day long. Is that kid any better to be hanging around than an unvaccinated kid? Is that kid that much of a risk? But it just shows how much effectiveness this mantra, this continued condemnation has provided. Now, Marek's disease is not measles, mumps. It's not whooping cough. But this is new research. It's only been happening in the last 4 years, where they're starting to understand how vaccinated chickens, don't think that they're not testing it on people somewhere, but that's just because there's a long, long track record and history of people being used as testing guinea pigs. And, that doesn't shock me. It shouldn't shock you if you listen to this show. But, if you have the chickenpox vaccine, you actually shed more virus or more dangerous viruses. So if you have an unvaccinated child, you probably have a scientific argument. Not that anybody out there that has irrational or uneducated opinions would care. But you could say your vaccinated child is much more dangerous to my child, even if he was vaccinated, because he's putting off more virulent strains. I mean, you shed viruses all the time whenever we come in contact with them, or other diseases. So even after you've had the chicken pox and the sores are gone, you're still shedding that virus, and other people around you could get it. So only now are they starting to learn about, hey, look, we've been giving people way too. There's now an acceptance and understanding and a push to change the culture, because we thought that antibiotics were the cure for everything, and now they are becoming less useful, more virulent diseases that are antibiotic resistant, gram negative, all sorts of stuff are being identified. Not that they probably weren't around a long time ago. We did have the bubonic plague, but now we're seeing more of that in international and global reporting, and a larger global scientific community. So I'm really encouraged to see that there's a lot of attention to this, because this is something that I've said for a long time. It's not so much that it's not the point about whether you want the vaccine or not. That actually it really is. It's the point that you should take it or not take it based on your preference, your choice. But there's some of the links, I guess, to autism and some of these other things that people point out as just false, or they always have a counter study showing, oh, they're 100% effective, 100% safe. Nobody ever dies. Nobody ever goes to that vaccine court. Less than 0.01 people, or 0.0001 people are affected by vaccines. Well, I mean, I don't know. They're probably, are they as safe as peanuts? Because apparently peanuts will kill a lot of people. Are they safer than, I don't know, a drive in the car? I mean, cars kill a lot of people. And that could be an epidemic. You could call that an epidemic. The water quality in some of the Texas cities where they have plastic plants. That's something that should be really focused on. But excuse me, vaccines seem to take the cake when it comes to things. I don't know that the government, I guess they not so much love it, but they like the idea that they're distributing the cure. Let's give it to you. You don't want to take the cure? Oh my God. But there's a good chance that they are wrong, and having herds and billions of vaccinated people is creating a real problem. And many of these are antiquated technologies, and you always have manufacturing product problems. Not every one of them is going to get mixed the same. If you ever get a bad bag of Lay's chips, I got a whole potato one time in my bag of Lay's chips. They gave me a couple extra bags. Actually, I sent it to them. Now they'd probably, if I shamed them on social media, they could, they would freak out. But there was 2 whole potatoes, and you're like, wow, how'd that happen? How'd that get through? If you don't think that happens with vaccines, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't take them. I only believe that people should have the right to refuse them, and I'm just tired of this same old mantra that just do what's good for you. Okay, you need to follow. You need to eat no fat and eat lots of sugar. Sugar's good for you. When I was a kid, every cereal, they labeled the sugar, and that was the selling factor. There was a sugar bear. Then he turned into a golden bear, and I don't know where he is anymore. He might be a transgender bear by now, but he's had to shift his roles. But the sugar bear became the golden bear. Nobody wanted to do that any longer. Sugar wasn't good. We finally figured out, hey, sugar gives you cancer. Sugar is horrible. But people for 50 years believed that it was fat. They demonized fat. There's lots of good fat out there. And if you sat around and ate nothing but sugar versus eating nothing but fat, you would die quicker from just eating the sugar. I am willing to bet. I'm not a scientist, though. Let's go. Maybe we have a scientist on the phone. I'm not sure. Let's go to Michigan and take a phone call. I can't get my call board to work here today. So, caller, you're live. Welcome to Blacklisted Radio. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, hey, Doug.
Hey.
Glad you're back. State of Michigan chief nurse for their health department, probably 5 years ago, told me that the so-called vaccine law is a misnomer. It's only a recommendation because school district that meets the quota for vaccinated students gets a financial reward. So it isn't a law. It's only a recommendation. And no, the students cannot be prevented from attending. Furthermore,
well, I agree with you. I think that you're right, but that is not what's happening in New York. There are children being banned from public spaces, parks, and they are cracking down. And you're right. There is no law, but there is a huge push to create those laws. And scarily, there is a lot of public support for it. So people are clamoring for it because of this coverage, because of the fear.
And what they need to know is, you mentioned the bubonic plague. The plagues of Europe began in 1348, according to a documentary I saw on YouTube, strangely called Battle for the Bible. Battle for the Bible. Because the Bible was always banned, even in virtue of it being in Latin. And then Wycliffe, in about 1370, began translating, a brilliant linguist, a scholar of his era, translating to English. Anyway, 1348, the first plague. Well, all right. So there were these body robbers who were in direct contact with the corpses, and the plague is the equivalent of Ebola.
My wife thinks they use thieves. That's why we have it in our bathroom. She says they fought the bubonic plague. I don't.
Right. So,
I don't know if that's true, but they thought it worked.
Well, here, I'll tell you, there was an MD PhD from MD Anderson in Houston, where NASA folks go, and his name is Agar, Agarwal, Agarwal, and he did a book entitled Healing Spices. And from my casual perusal of other scholarship works, I have learned, for instance, a French culinary herb known as tarragon. Tarragon circumvents, shuts down the anaerobic energy process of all cancer cells, which is required because cancer cells produce enormous quantities of energy by virtue of something like 10 to 20 times the number of insulin receptors on the cell membranes of those cancer cells, by which glucose is burned anaerobically. And the guy that
Hey, you know what, Fred? I mean, really interesting stuff. I mean, I don't think we can flesh it all out here. And, I mean, there's a lot of great herbal and organic solutions they're trying to outlaw as well. So, yeah, there's a vacuum. And, now Facebook's going after any anti-vaxxer, if you have the cure for cancer, you could end up like Kevin Trudeau. And so, it's the big C word, and there's a lot of different tumors. And I don't know, I don't want to give out medical advice, but, turmeric, tarragon, all of those things have a pretty good track record. There's lots of information on them. So we could probably do it better if if you just researched it rather than me and Fred fleshing it out for you. So it's a good alternative to vaccines. I think, healthy hygiene and not hanging around dead bodies or grave robbing is a good way to stay healthy as well. Let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Richard in Austin. Richard, welcome to Blacklisted Radio.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I'll be real quick. Yeah, I just wanted to say a lot of people bash Trump. Even on RBN, I hear a lot of people putting him down because he doesn't cover all the issues that we want him to cover. But if people would just refer back to one of the first speeches he made when he got in office, he asked the clergy to stop obeying orders from the government. He said that the 501c3 was now null and void. They didn't have to respect it anymore. And he even explained what it was all about, how Lyndon Johnson put it into place to silence the churches. But seems like that speech was forgotten because the strongest fight that we could bring against the globalists is the churches. But somehow even your listeners and all the rest of the people who are against the globalists, their listeners will not take to the streets with their clergy. Now, there's a group called the Clergy Response Team that was bought out in 2006 or so.
Yeah.
When
you got to help. You have to help FEMA. We got to help round up those people in time of crisis. They're going to look to you. You're going to be the leader, and this is your little badge, and you can get a gun and stuff. Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So how come RBN listeners, GCN, I don't care. I mean, they're all respectable people, and I have clergy friends, and I try to get them involved with political activism, and they just refuse to do it even when I tell them that Trump told them that they can specifically trash the 501c3. So now we're the problem.
Here's the thing, though. I think that, Richard, that a lot of those people are paranoid because they think, Donald Trump's not going to be around very long. Many of the things that Obama wanted, all that health care, possibly is going to be dismantled. Bernie Sanders, he's now out there touting the idea, and I don't know if it's true. He said that, tens of thousands, maybe millions of people in this country are going to die if we revert from Obama's, national health care, the Modernization Act that we are all loving. I guess you're loving it. I don't know. It's $1,000 for my family a month. So I don't know that it's working out for people like me. Maybe some other people are working out, but I think a lot of those people are also probably part of, that they're probably not Trump fans, and I think that they if you have these evangelicals that are so influential, and I think right after. We saw that with the election of Reagan and how he was able to utilize, even Bush Sr. was able to utilize those huge factions of people. And, here's the other thing. I mean, the amount of people that are in churches is heavily declining. So, their businesses and people are desperate to keep people in the churches, so they don't want to rattle them. They don't want to get into a political side because whether you're left or right, half of the people are going to hate you. Half of the people are not going to like what you're saying. So no matter what they do, they if they get political, they're dividing their congregations. That divides the plate that is going around, and a lot of people don't want to intermix that. And I understand, I believe that we shouldn't have churches and schools and, other ideologies other than what that.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this before we run out of time. See, I understand everything you just said, and I've heard all of that before. So then at the end of the day, all you're really telling me is that all these Christians, Muslims, whatever, see, because this transcends all of the denominations. All I'm saying is if we're with people of goodwill who don't want to see this evil take over our bodies with vaccines and air and water and everything, then we need to go ahead and get over our fears and take to the streets, period. And if we can't do that, then we got to stop blaming Trump because Trump opened up the opportunity for us. Whoever takes office after him, well, then that's something he couldn't control. But the opportunity has been given. He struck down the 501c3, so we got to stop making excuses for these preachers, clergies, reverends, fathers, priests, whatever the hell they are, because they're neither one of them.
You're lumping some bad people in there that have bad PR going on, Richard. I appreciate the phone call. I understand what you're saying. And, hey, yeah, if the time is to rally people and you want them up there and you think that Trump's provided the opportunity to get out there and be more activated, I mean, I sense your frustration. I think that I found that in the political process, definitely in, churches that make an agreement with the state that they get to be a tax-free organization as long as they're not political. And some of those churches probably, there are ones out there that are not 501c3, but don't be shocked when somebody who's running a business, when you look at the priest, or the preacher, and look at their car, start to understand, everybody's got obligations. They got 5 kids, we got to pay we all got to go to Hawaii this summer. I promised my daughter I'd buy her prom dress. It becomes a business in whatever you're doing in your livelihood. So, when you get into this business system, okay, we're going to spread the truth. All right, what are the rules? What do we got to do? Oh, well, you got to follow all this paperwork and and here's a book and here's your guidebook, and then if the government calls you, you got to do this and that, and you got to go to college and, learn theology. It's kind of a system, especially, look at Catholicism. It's taking a huge hit because of touchy priests and the engendering of that culture. So, yeah, I think a lot of people look to the church for spiritual guidance, and you would think that they would be more apt to lead their flocks into maybe something more productive. I don't know if trying to do that just blows everything up. It just gets everybody, because you have to agree on what the problem is, and then you're not really a church. You're now an advocacy organization going out there. But if you're doing good things in the community, helping people, bringing awareness to issues, especially on a local level of church, the outpouring, like from the Mennonites and lots of groups, for my father and mother-in-law when they lost their house in a fire a few years ago, was just so genuine and heartwarming and humbling. And these people, they've never met you, but they care about you because they have a higher spiritual belief. I will never diminish that. And I believe that people, Christians, Muslims, people of faith, that it's an interpretation. If you think that, if you believe in good and evil, then you have to look at it from a more removed view. People sit there and debate texts and certain phrases, and should you lay with a man or not a man? I don't know where you're looking at. You're looking at some old book, really old book that's been transcribed and interpreted, many times, and you're trying to find that exact answer. Look, do you believe that it's your business to worry about it and that God is going to smite thee, and that means it's okay for you to exclude people? Or do you love everybody? Jesus, he loved hookers and even bankers. He even loved the bankers, and they're the bad guys in the book. That's why I like the Bible. The bad guys are identified. Zacchaeus, all these people. But they can be turned. You can always turn a bad guy into a good guy, so you shouldn't give up. Don't give up hope on that. And so, yeah, I understand your frustration. It's real quagmire. I thought that bringing about, and that's one of the things I think GCN and RBN were really out there at the beginning of this, trying to bring about political change through awareness to, things that people didn't know. Didn't quite happen, but it's made a lot of critical thinkers even more critical, and those people are out there doing it. They're moving and shaking and inspiring people. Maybe they're not out on the streets, but I'm still here. You're still out there, Richard. So we're ahead of the curve and definitely over the target. And that's where we want to be. Appreciate you calling in and all of you guys listening to the show. Ken for producing. Thank you, sir. I'll be back next week. Promise, for another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. Until then, take care.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, kid. I appreciate it, my friend. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, have a great week, man.
Hey, you too.
Take care. Bye.